We have been doing theme-based ministry at Bucksmont for a few years now. This month's theme is the dual theme of desolation and consolation, and it can be a challenging one to connect to, especially that sadder concept of desolation. And this morning we are exploring the intersections of our human experience of this theme and how it is reflected back to us by the natural world around us during this time of year. Landscapes like deserts and places in the midst of deep winter freeze, the remnants of a forest after wildfire, and coastlines after a hurricane. Beauty can be found in the midst of the desolate spaces we place our gaze upon. Tragedy is there too. Let us not forget that. To be able to see the beautiful does not mean we need to forget or negate the losses. It is about seeing a more complete picture rather than seeing only the happier pieces and casting aside what we would rather not see at all. The idea of our theme is that desolation and consolation are two intrinsically related concepts. Rather than either or thinking, this is about both and thinking. After something is desolated, part of the path toward healing is to be consoled. When this happens in a human context, we see the pattern unfold through a tragic event happening to a particular family or a larger area, and people working to begin the healing. Rarely is the tragedy or the healing in a vacuum. There are relationships that echo the pain and the consolation both, outward from the harm and inward toward the one needing help. Even when we feel as if we are alone, we are not. Even when we are physically distant from those we care about, we know we remain connected. This is one of the main reasons I believe in the power of religious community. It is not at its most powerful during times of gladness and celebration, though those are certainly the times it feels good to be part of a community. Our congregations are most impactful when the challenging times come. Our social connections matter most when we are in the midst of the tragic times. Some of the most beautiful moments I have experienced as a minister and as a human being have been in the midst of the tragic and the devastating. At the bedside of someone who is near death, the tenderness of those around them, and the sharing of memories of those we have lost. It is one of the reasons that I find memorial services incredibly beautiful, even as they are incredibly sad. We never wish to be part of a tragic event, but we also know that the hard times are part of a life fully lived. Poet Mary Oliver begins with the desolation in her poem Hurricane. It didn't behave like anything you had ever imagined. The wind tore at the trees. The rain fell for days, slant and hard. The back of the hand to everything. I watched the trees bow and their leaves fall and crawl back to the earth, as though that was that. This was one hurricane I lived through. The other one was of a different sort and lasted longer. Then I felt my own leaves giving up and falling, the back of the hand to everything. What we do after the desolation matters a great deal. how we respond when tragedy comes. Again, the work of healing is a collective effort. It is something that grows out of relationships. Words said, meals delivered, kindnesses given freely to each other. The dangerous thing about the devastating moments are that we so often feel very alone in them. In fact, when the harm is caused by people, that is often the goal, to make us feel alone. Similarly, the work for justice is not an individual endeavor. As some of our younger members shared this morning, a core part of the message of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was expanded from the hymn, "We Shall Overcome." Not I, but we. Not alone, but together. Because great change is also not a solo affair. It requires movements to make it happen. The quote, "We shall overcome because the moral arc of the universe is long, but it bends toward justice." King's powerful paraphrasing is from our own Unitarian and transcendentalist ancestor, Reverend Theodore Parker, who was an abolitionist, and in his sermon said this: "I do not pretend to understand the moral universe. The arc is a long one. My eye reaches but little ways. I cannot calculate the curve and complete the figure by experience of sight. I can divine it by conscience, and from what I see, I am sure it bends toward justice." What I find important about this is that it is by our conscience and our actions that the arc of history bends towards justice. It is not guaranteed, but it is possible through the work of community, the work of movements, the work of all of us. Here we are in January, during a weekend and holiday connected to that struggle for racial and economic justice that has been part of the fabric of our country since before it even began. We are a little over a week away from the painful reminder that desolation is not a solo endeavor either. It takes a movement and impacts people far beyond the epicenter of the actions as well. We are feeling those echoes of those actions still. This part of the year, after the sparkle of the holidays that bring the calendar year to a close, can feel a bit desolate too. And the natural world around us reflects this on the surface. The trees are bare, the weather is harsh, and it can seem like we are as far from warmer weather as possible. But even out our windows, and in deserts, and in the painful moments of our lives, hope is reflected back to us. The end of Mary Oliver's poem. But listen now to what happened to the actual trees. Toward the end of that summer, they pushed new leaves from their stubbed limbs. It was the wrong season, yes, but they couldn't stop. They looked like telephone poles and didn't care. And after the leaves came blossoms. For some things, there are no wrong seasons, which is what I dream of for me. Nature inspires us and reminds us that winter does not last. Desolation does not last. Plants that appear gone for good will soon be coming back to more observable life. Maple trees know this. Their sap begins to flow right now. That is why sugaring season begins in January for those who make maple syrup. It stretches all the way into April most years. From the cold of winter into early spring. Animals know this too. They have gone quiet and are more hidden now, in nests and burrows to avoid the worst of the cold with stores of food gathered. I want to share another poem. This one is by Jewish Hungarian poet Hannah Shanesh, which was set to haunting music and eventually became part of our teal hymnal as the hymn Eli, Eli. Hannah was not only a poet, but a paratrooper and one of 37 who parachuted into Yugoslavia in World War II to rescue Hungarian Jews about to be deported to Auschwitz. Sadly, Hannah was captured and eventually put to death for her brave actions, and this poem was written by her just a year before her death. Her words link the power of nature and our human connection to the divine, even during the desolate times of life. My God of all, God's love shall never end. The land and the sea, the rush of the waters, the thundering heavens, the prayers of our heart, the sand and the sea, the rush of the waters, the thundering prayers, the thundering heavens, the prayers of our hearts. Our consolation from the natural world is that this is part of the cycle of the seasons, which continue to turn as days grow longer. Here in the month of January, it can feel like the time of year to skip ahead, but I believe that even the quieter and colder and harsher months of the year have something to teach us. There is a time in life for rest and for regathering, a time to go inward and be reflective. From our chalice lighting words today by Terry Tempest Williams. If the desert is holy, it is because it is a forgotten place that allows us to remember the sacred. Perhaps that is why every pilgrimage to the desert is a pilgrimage to the self. There is no place to hide, and so we are found. In the desolate places, we come to find ourselves. In the hardest parts of this life, we see reflected the healing that is possible in community. And in the natural world, we see that even out of season, new growth is possible after a storm. A reminder, though, that this may be the exact right time to reach out to someone. You could send a card, make a telephone call, or comment on their Facebook. Any way you can share that you are thinking of another is worth doing as we all await the coming spring and the possibility of gathering together again. May we support one another through this season. May we know that we are not alone in waiting. May we connect to those who need it. May we connect when we are the ones who need it. May we rest and may we grow toward the coming spring. So may it be.